Okay, a couple things. One, there was an interesting story, and it's like I'm looking at 49er Web Zone, and their top story by David Bonilla is Albert Breer names potential future 49er cap casualties after the Bosa and the Ayuk extension. Are you familiar with this story?
I just saw it pop up earlier, but I haven't got the whole details on it. So let's go about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, and just to kind of, Breer has, I don't know who did the interview with Breer, but Breer was talking Niners, and he basically said that, after the Niners sign Bosa to an extension, which should be before camp starts, my guess is he'll get 30 to 33 million a year, somewhere in there. It'll give the Niners a little bit of a brief, hit on this year's cap, but then, of course, it's expensive going forward. Then there's Brandon Ayuk, who may get an extension at some point as well. Anyway, he goes on and says that when you look ahead to 2024, the 49ers have 9 players that are set to account for nearly $190 million against their 2024 cap, including Debo, Trent, Armstead, Warner, Kittle, Mooney Ward, Hargrave, McCaffrey, and then Brandon Ayuk at $14.1 million they're estimating, and of course Bosa's in that mix as well. He says, assuming he's with the team, quarterback Trey Lance will be in his 4th season and add a fully guaranteed $10.9 million to that number. And then he goes on to write a Trey Lance trade, if he has a strong preseason this year, could create some breathing room. Having both Warner and Greenlaw as off-ball linebackers could be seen as a luxury, so maybe Greenlaw's another guy that could be offloaded. And then he says if McCaffrey shows his age or winds up getting hurt, it's possible that he could be on the chopping block. And then he also throws Kyle Juszczyk out there as a guy who could be on the chopping block as well. But, it's interesting. Let's focus on the Lance thing for a second, because I think, first of all, all these insiders have, they've been basically chirping. I mean, I said it. I was the first one to say it in February when I heard John Lynch say, hey, Trey's got to play, and that's the challenge because we got a team that's ready to go. And to me, it just sounded very much like they were shopping him. And this is before any of these guys actually came out and said as much. Then you heard Rappaport and Breer and some of these guys, Schefter, kind of suggest that the trading of Trey Lance was at least a possibility. I thought it would happen before the draft. It didn't happen before the draft. And Lance is still on the team, but we don't know that it didn't happen at the draft because they decided they don't want to trade him, or if it didn't happen at the draft because they didn't get an offer they liked. It came out of the draft like the talk was, well, there was no market for him. Like, it wasn't like, hey, the Niners changed their mind. They don't want to keep him. They're all in on Trey Lance and staying with Trey Lance in the future. That wasn't the report. The report was, there wasn't a market for him. And Rappaport, when he had a chance to basically say, when he wasn't dealt during the draft, he could have easily came out and just said, hey, you know what? I was wrong. Trey's not going to be traded, and I guess wrong, or my sources were wrong, or whatever. And he didn't do that. He kind of doubled down on it and was like, well, you may see a trade this summer when they know that Purdy's healthy and ready and this and that. Now you have Breer suggesting that the Niners could trade Trey Lance. And once again, I'll read the quote. A Lance trade, if he has a strong preseason, could create some breathing room. So I kind of look at it, and I think most people look at it as, if Trey plays well, then he's going to be a Niner, right? I mean, you drafted him, and I realize Brock has taken that number 1 job, but isn't the whole purpose of drafting Trey because you liked him? And you heard Kyle Juszczyk tell Haberman and Middlecoff the other day that Trey is beloved by the players in the room. And I believe that because he's a really likable young guy, and he's a respectful young guy, and he's all about working hard. And, there's no reason not to love him. He's got, very lovable traits. Not like this guy is lazy or is a dog. This guy works hard, and football's important to him, and he's a solid human being. So I wasn't surprised at all by Juszczyk's comment. But what do you make of Breer's comment? Because I think if you ask most Niner fans, they feel like, okay, if Trey doesn't play well, maybe the Niners will move on. But nobody ever really goes to the point of if Trey plays well, they may move on. But now Breer's kind of painting this picture of them being in a tough cap spot, and that if Lance plays well, he's making it sound like there's a chance he could be dealt to create breathing room on the cap going forward. What do you make of that?
I mean, at the end of the day, is anybody on the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan said this many times, anybody's available for trade. Maybe not Nick Bosa. He's probably the one guy that they probably wouldn't trade right now. He's kind of like their only unexpendable guy. I feel like that's the vibe I've gotten from Kyle, but he said it many times. He goes, they're always looking to upgrade their team. They're always looking to get players and make their team as best as it can get. I mean, CMC, a lot of people last year didn't even think that was a possibility for them to make that trade, and they did it. And it was like shocking. I think people are still shocked now to this day that they have CMC. Like, nobody expected Lynch to go out there and do that midseason trade. So I feel like the 49ers, they assess their roster. And yeah, if there's an opportunity for them to trade to make their roster better, I think, of course, there's a possibility to trade anybody on this team. Now, because he does better, definitely increases his value. But a lot of this is tied to Brock, as we know, his health and his well-being coming off the surgery. We still don't know. We don't know how he's been doing out there in Jacksonville. We will see what he's going to be able to do starting next week in training camp. Like, how limited is he going to be? How far along is he going to come in training camp? So I think if if Trey Lance plays good, I think it helps the Niners, because then they can kind of give Brock that cushion of saying, we don't need to rush him right now. And then Trey could come out there and play and start games. And if he wins, the better he does, that it increases his value for the future if they do have to trade him. Now, it also helps them evaluate him in the terms of, they did draft him. They, again, being a team that traded so much to go and get Trey Lance, they're a team that they're capable to make those trades if they really have to. That's how they got Trey in the first place. They made a big trade. They made a bold move. So I don't think that it's impossible for them to trade him, but I think that Trey is going to stick around just for the fact of we still don't know what's going to happen on Brock, and then if he has some setbacks, you have Trey. So I think it's going to be two quarterbacks coming in, and it's going to be good for the team. But in terms of the whole salary cap situation, they usually figure it out. Parag's good at backloading contracts, restructuring things. So if they have to, I'm sure they'll play the numbers game and have to move things around. But it is a concern for the 49ers because, yeah, they have Bosa that's going to come on the books. It'll give them some, cap space this year when they extend it, but then it kicks in next year. And you're right, Brandon Ayuk. Then they have Debo, who's primed for a big year. He looks like he's going to kind of have a comeback season this year. And then if Debo does good, now is he going to be expendable? Will he be on the trading block? So it's not just Trey Lance. I think you can say that for any of these players. But, of course, the media likes to single out Trey because he's the quarterback, and 49ers tend to focus on the quarterback in the offseason, and it gets headlines. So it makes people think, oh, is Trey Lance on the trading block? So I think you can say that for everybody on this team, Larry, that Fred Warner, if he plays great, maybe they move on from him, because you're right. Greenlaw, maybe he takes that next step and becomes this all-pro, and it makes Fred Warner expendable. You can say that for anybody. Players, are not guaranteed to stick around their teams nowadays because of the nature of the NFL. It's a business, unfortunately. Yeah. But
we don't know. We don't know what we don't know is we don't know, one, how the Niners really feel about Brock.
Yeah.
And how they really feel about Trey. Are they in love with Brock and feel that Brock's, their next superstar quarterback, or do they just think that he's the guy who's healthiest and helps them win best this year? Do they like Trey on the same level they did the day they drafted him, or because to me, if he plays well, he's here. But the way Breer shapes this, he almost makes it seem like if he plays well, there'll be a market for him, and then he won't be here, which is very interesting.